The rare Friday recording, possibly Saturday episode of Pat's Interference, because I don't know exactly when this is going to go up, but I know it will go up before the Patriots play the Bears on Monday night. And I know we have Jeff Howe here, national NFL insider for The Athletic, who last time told us he never tires of hearing that. So again, this is Jeff Howe, national NFL insider for The Athletic, which I can't imagine you love the job the entire time, because for the folks on YouTube, they can tell you did not get much sleep last night. And that's because Christian McCaffrey went to San Francisco. I don't want to talk about that trade. But tell the folks a little bit about the the late night ugly part of the job, because it's on your face right now.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Can you tell that I'm tired? That's weird. I thought I could wear the hat just low enough. I thought if I wore all black, it would like cancel out the black circles under my eyes. I thought if I shut off the lights behind me, maybe you couldn't see me as well. But here we are, and we'll have some fun. But no, I mean, watching the Thursday night game as usual. And usually after the national games, Thursday, Sunday, Monday night, I'm up until, a good night. I'm in bed at like 12:30, 1 o'clock. But trade went down, and it was something that I didn't anticipate happening, obviously, at that hour of the night. But you see why it happens. I mean, the Panthers weren't actively shopping him, but they knew the calls were going to come in. As soon as Matt Rule got fired, people were going to call about all their guys. And it was going to take something of a sizable portion in order for them to give him away. And the 49ers clearly stepped up with that. So it was a very late night. I'm on about 4.5 hours of sleep. If I pass out here, just talk without me.
Yeah, I'll call Caitlin. Not a big deal. What you also did yesterday, though, was write or finish or publish a piece about the Patriots. You made it back to Gillette this week, which I joked at asking if you needed directions. It's great to have you back. You ended up writing just how the Patriots had turned it around from 1-3 to 3-3, not only just beating the Lions and the Bears, because everyone would go, oh, just look at the schedule. You said, look at the head coach, and had a lot of quotes from Devin McCourty, Matthew Slater, David Andrews to back that up. I think Matthew Slater called him, our shepherd. And look, we're going to always go where we're directed as a team, and we're lucky to have a great director in Belichick. Belichick being a great director isn't new, but what's something that surprised you in the process of kind of reporting that piece that, or at most, had your attention?
Well, I was just interested in, so when I was talking to all three of those guys, it was, and, I haven't been down to Gillette. I hadn't been in the locker room since probably the end of 2019, Brady's last game. I thought it was, the way I put it was, all right, you guys could lose a game in the Brady era, or if you lost 2 games, whatever, we would make it sound like, we in the media would make it sound like the sky is falling and everything is, crashing back to earth and what's going on. And it'd be 1 game. And we'd all know in the back of our minds, and they admitted kind of they did too, that eventually everything would self-correct. Just listening to these guys say, all right, you got to make sure that you're leading. You got to make sure that, these younger guys who haven't won anything can really step up and kind of follow their lead. They come into with a 2-game losing streak. They come into the locker room on Wednesday for their team meeting in week 5. And, they're hooting and hollering and they're being loud. And, that just shows the young guys, hey, it's not the end of the world here. It's a 2-game losing streak, but they can still kind of figure their way out of something like this. And, they even spoke about like, hey, Tom Brady gets suspended in 2016. What's going to happen here? And Belichick just delivers the same message. That message carries over the course of a number of years or even just a number of weeks for the younger guys who don't know him as well. It kind of keeps that steadying presence. And, it may not lead to a Super Bowl. It may not even lead to a playoff trip, but it did help them thoroughly dismantle 2 teams that were really good in a couple of key phases, and the Patriots neutralized those phases.
And they did that with Bailey Zappe, who, in case you missed it, by the look of you again, maybe you have Zappe fever and these are the current ongoing symptoms, or you're like someone in my mentions the other day who says if Zappe plays Monday night against the Bears, it'll be 28-7 Patriots. If Mac plays, the Bears blow them out, which I still want to follow up on that guy because holy shit. But Zappe fever, as it were, has obviously been a positive. The Patriots have won 2 games. The kid has played well. It's all been a big surprise. But he's not playing because he beat out Mac Jones. He's on there because Mac got injured. Mac, it seems, is close to 100%. Doug Kye had reported he's about 90% as of Wednesday. We're talking here on Friday. You're saying there's no quarterback controversy. What do we know about who plays quarterback on Monday night?
Well, once Mac is healthy enough to start, he's going to start. Like, it's not even up for debate. I think it's been debated. I've certainly seen it debated in my Twitter mentions. I think there's probably been some media debate in Boston about it.
No,
but there's been absolutely no wavering at all inside Gillette Stadium. It's always been Mac's job as soon as he's been ready to get back in there. In terms of the readiness, just kind of back it up a couple weeks. Week 5, they knew probably later on Friday with some outside hope that Mac would wake up on Saturday and feel a whole lot better. Obviously, that didn't happen, so Zappe went. Week 6, the decision went till Saturday. So, a day closer, a week later. And now you go into a Monday night game, so you get the extra day. So he is closer. But I think going into this week, they truly didn't know. And it was going to take a slower ramp up rather than just, throw him. You don't want to throw him out there. All of a sudden he has a setback and you lose him for an extra 2, 3, 4 weeks or whatever. So it's just really just kind of I'm laughing because I know what I'm about to say. It really is about taking it day by day.
Oh, no.
Because
Time out. Stop the pod. You are going to the corner like you said, your little girls, and you're going to stand and stare in the corner for 5 minutes.
They truly, this is an injury, especially at this phase of the rehab program, where you don't know how you're going to feel on a day-by-day basis. So, you go into the week feeling really good, but they still need to make sure that he can get through a decent chunk of practice to make sure that he can last an entire game on Monday night. But you know what? Things are obviously trending in a favorable direction.
Right. And here's the thing, and I've said this multiple times here, other places. Like, the thing to always keep in mind with this injury was it typically takes 4 to 6 weeks. Sunday is going to mark 4 weeks since the injury, which in my mind makes this one of the more overcomplicated, over-dramatized, and for fair reason. Even your old colleague, Mike Irwin, Kerry Garigian, has this idea that, I'm reporting that Mac was pushing to play as soon as that Green Bay game and wanted to get out on the field. And then he's on the field on Friday. He doesn't move really well, but the guy is a maniac. And that is both what makes him, a good quarterback and also someone who would put himself at risk for a week 4 game at Green Bay. Now we're here in week 7. Things are obviously much more comfortable thanks to their record at 3-3 and also the opponent. Like, is it any more complicated than the things you just said and I just said?
No. He's gotten a lot of opinions on the extent of the injury, what the rehab should look like. But ultimately, he was able to put off surgery in his hope of returning as quickly as possible. So here they are, and it seems like there's a pretty decent chance that he plays on Monday night.
Yeah, it's you could have also just ended that he's gotten a lot of opinions, period, as far as maybe his attitude goes or his injury status or what he's been doing, because it has been a lot the last week or 2 or 3 or 4. But I think he's going to play. Reporting from ESPN, NBC, is just he expects to be available, which doesn't say he expects to play because he understands that decision is not his. But yeah, I think all signs point to Mac returning on Monday night. And if not, it's partly because we play the Bears, who are 8-point underdogs as it stands today on Friday. And next week you play the Jets, who are suddenly 4-2 and probably still the same old Jets, but it'll take a little more to unmask them this time around than probably last year when you beat them 54-13. We're going to get to the Bears in a second. I wanted to touch on 2 other topics though with you. Obviously having your national perspective. One was on the rookies. They play 10 at Cleveland. I am on the record on this podcast giving them a D+ for that draft class. And it wasn't just, looking at other people's media evaluations of these players and then using them to inform my opinions. I watched the film. I look at the positions, the whole makeup of the roster, gave it a D+ anyway. We're trending in the direction of me, along with a ton of other people, being very wrong. What did we miss in that process? And what have you heard from people around the league who are also going, oh, wow, Cole Strange, not bad. Hey, Jack Jones, that's another pick. Tyquan Thornton. Wow. Like anything along those lines.
Well, the people I spoke to during the draft and then afterward, whether it was weeks after or, somewhere as close to as we are now, not too far in the past, as I struggle to figure out some words to throw out at you, is like they drafted good players. The critiques were where they drafted them. And, we're not uncovering brand new news here. Like Cole Strange was probably going to go into the early third rounds. Like and this is opinions from multiple people at an executive level who, like numerous people at an executive level who knew that he was a good player, would have been very happy drafting him. They just didn't see him going in the first, certainly the first rounds, or, more likely than not, he was not going to get taken in the second round. Jack Jones, I spoke to evaluators, again, at an executive level who viewed him as the best cover cornerback in the class. They just were very concerned about the off-field stuff. And so it's like, where's the sweet spot? But then again, like you get concerned about that. You might not necessarily want to bring him into your locker room because you might not know if he's going to thrive in that situation. They look at Bill Belichick and say, well, he's got a long, extensive history of bringing a guy into his culture and making sure they maximize his talent and they keep him right. Right now, Jack Jones looks like an absolute stud. And that was, I think, when I was down there almost every day with you guys in the spring, I mean, that was pretty prevalent early on. Like Jack Jones looked legit pretty quickly, at least in my opinion.
Yeah,
and then,
he would have these plays, just to go back, because it has been a progression with him, right? It wasn't like he started day one. There were so many plays where he's like, oh, like this close. And you saw it in the preseason, he's jumping an out route and his both hands are outstretched and the ball just goes a couple inches there. So he's come along in a way that wasn't just he arrived, okay, he's going to start. Like I wasn't there for Malcolm Butler's spring, but JC Jackson, I remember getting his hands in a few more passes. It's just now with Jack Jones, it's a little more delayed. There are like shades of JC as I see it.
Yeah, I mean, quick story just for anybody who hadn't heard me say this one before, but like Malcolm Butler in 2014, he was all over the ball consistently. Now, they had an outstanding secondary. There was no reason whatsoever for the Patriots to put Malcolm Butler on the field in 2014. It took a slew of injuries for him to even get on a slew of injuries and poor play, I should say, in the Super Bowl for him to even get onto the field in that game. But then when he picked off that pass, anybody who was there, any reporter who was there covering those spring workouts, the training camp workouts, was not the least bit surprised. Now, obviously surprising in the moment, but like when you start to accumulate that many plays in the off season, that stuff sometimes bears out over the course of the season. Now, it doesn't necessarily always equate to making quite possibly the greatest defensive play in Super Bowl history, but like you look back and you say, that really doesn't surprise me because he has that in his bag. And seeing the plays that Jack Jones has made. Now, I wasn't there. I was there in training camp for one day, so I certainly didn't see his progression this summer the way I thought I saw it in the spring. But like, I still have the Patriots on my second TV every Sunday here, and seeing those interceptions. I mean, those are wow plays. Like that one, the toe tapper on the sideline was one of the best plays I've seen in the NFL this season. So that's a kid who clearly looks like he could develop into a seriously talented cornerback, assuming everything continues to work out right in the culture fit. And right now, it seems to be going in that direction. Tyquan Thornton's another one where, the speed pops. I spoke to somebody who wasn't necessarily sure that speed was going to pop on like a game speed level, like the 40 times great. Can you play that fast once you're on the field? I mean, the game he played on Sunday with a couple touchdowns is okay. You know what? That's a hell of a start. Can you do it more consistently? Now, my opinion on him in the spring, he looked very far away. And then it was, I don't remember if it was mini camp. Did he come back in mini camp or maybe it was just, seeing him in training camp for a day, but like you could see the growth. And like, I know I was away for a short amount of time and then came back, or maybe it was a longer time if it was training camp. I'm rambling here, but like you could see that the kid was getting better. And
yes, that's absolutely true before the injury. And I had heard he was in consideration to start week 1, which is something I've said here in the podcast. If it had not been for the broken collarbone, which healed faster than they expected, you get the initial range of 6 to 10 weeks, and maybe it's 8, and then it ends up being on the earlier side. But that was okay, we don't want to hurry this kid along, understanding he was so close to being so good for us right away.
Yeah, and especially with the body type, he needs to get that mass. You don't want a guy who is coming off of a collarbone injury, especially. It takes a hard hit, all of a sudden his rookie season is completely washed.
Right. All right, let's do trade talk. The Patriots, like the rest of the NFL, trade deadline still more than a week away. Let's keep this as simple as possible. If they make a trade, they're most likely add to this position. If they're going to make a trade, they'll most likely deal from this position or this player.
If they bring one in, I think it's probably going to be something quote unquote boring, like a defensive tackle or inside linebacker depth, off ball linebacker depth. Just because they're a little thin there, and especially with some of the injuries to Lawrence Guy, Christian Barmore, whatever their status happens to be. It could be like one of those Isaac Sopoaga trade deadlines where everybody's like, oh, all right, well, everybody else is getting Christian McCaffrey or maybe Cam Akers and so on and so forth, and they get a third string defensive tackle. But I don't know if they're going to go all in on a trade like that this year. I mean, the next two games could be big if they beat the Bears, which I think they should, and they beat the Jets, who were playing really well and have legitimately deserved that 4-2 record. Maybe that does change how they view the second half of the season. If they trade someone away, I still look at Isaiah Wynn because I know the criticism. He has not played well this season. I understand that. But every team in the league, every single team wants offensive linemen. I mean, they all have some type of value. Of course, if you trade Wynn, now your depth at right tackle is even further diminished. If you lose somebody else to injury beyond that, then you're in a lot of trouble. But you see what maybe his value is. And then maybe possibly one of those receivers. Kendrick Bourne. I mean, Nelson Aguilar has always been available. It's just the contract is so obstructive to a trade. I mean, you look at it as sort of like a Baker Mayfield situation. Teams kind of looked at the Patriots and were like, yeah, if you want to get rid of him, eat some of the contract. And the Patriots are like, well, they don't want to eat the contract. So that's why, there's been kind of a standstill there. Or I shouldn't even say a standstill. Just nothing's really kind of moved.
Yeah, I don't have much on this front, even from a speculation standpoint. I think off-ball linebacker would be the position they would add to, just from the fact of they went bargain hunting and threw a bunch of darts, and now all of them are on the ground. Whether you look at Cameron McGrone, he might pan out as a fifth-round pick. We'll get Mac Wilson, who's thrived in the dime packages, kind of pass first only, but he gets benched in weeks 3 and 4. Jelani Tavai's been fine, but I don't think he's someone you want starting on the interior where Green Bay then exposes his lack of speed in concert with Bentley. Like, they're very good specialized players. And right now at that position, you need someone who can play ideally 3 downs, and they just don't have that. Now, that player, I think for them, you probably wouldn't go for someone in the final year of their contract, even though the price would be depressed because, again, they're playing the long game here. Like, they're positioned very, very well for next offseason. Mac will be in his 3rd year, et cetera, et cetera. It's just hard to find the sweet spot of them getting such a deal where they're not giving up a whole lot, and it's something that can pay off in the future as well as right now. As far as dealing Aguilar, yeah, I've heard the same thing, and I just you're at the point of attaching a pick, which again, for someone who's playing a long game, there's no reason for them to do that to get off that deal, which is just going to expire at the end anyway. And I also don't think that their depth at receiver is so great that you're like, oh, take your pick. We can lose anyone. Tyquan Thornton's great. Like, Devontae Parker gets dinged up. Okay, Kendrick Bourne's been productive, but he's got turf toe now. And thankfully, as I reported, it's not serious. It's just a matter of that depth is going to be the strength of the position, not any one or two of these players that you can consistently rely upon.
Yeah, and I think I'll back it up, just sort of like the long game that you were mentioning. That's so important, and I've been hammering this since the offseason, really since I think they bowed out in the playoffs. The only way you're going to catch Buffalo is through playing the long game. Like, Buffalo is as good as they are right now because they drafted and developed guys for their system over the course of a number of years. And now all of a sudden, or I shouldn't say now, like, they started to hit their stride and start to hit that peaking level last season. That's why they're legitimate Super Bowl contenders. And this isn't a fluke. This is something that clearly looks sustainable. So if you're the Patriots, yeah, you had that great off season a year and a half ago, but it still didn't, it got you to the playoffs, but you need to make sure that you can get to a point where you're steadily ascending. It's not like a roller coaster, as much as you can have one in New England. I mean, Belichick, going back to the original point, is just such a steadying force, but he treats the roster that way too. Like, you can't have these dramatic ups and downs and think that eventually you're going to catch Buffalo because Buffalo's model is so sustainable.
Yeah, and you know what's funny too is you look at Buffalo, excuse me, and Kansas City. Like I think the way that they've pivoted, maybe less so Buffalo when they get Von Miller and they spend lavishly in some of their free agent additions, but they were building through middle class veterans through the draft and playing the long game when McDermott gets there 17 all the way in through 21 when they're legitimate Super Bowl contenders. The Chiefs, now that they've been there, are taking an approach of, okay, we'll lose a Tyreek Hill as opposed to pay for what's probably going to be an all pro year this year, and then he'll start to decline. They're playing the long game as well, which is how the Patriots always stayed in the mix. We would rather be very, very good every single year as opposed to going all in like the Rams are now paying the price for being elite last season and then, having no cap space or draft picks. And then like they'll be around and the Patriots see the value in will be in the mix. And yes, Brady drove a lot of that, but the way they handled their cap was such that they were never going to have a down year. And you saw that even when Brady got hurt in 2008 or get suspended, like they're going to slowly build this as opposed to pushing all their chips in, because sometimes being in the mix, as we saw last year, is good enough for Cincinnati, a number 4 seed, if you just make sure you're there. And then sometimes you'll break through either on your own or with the help of the rest of the league. That just kind of comes down to your level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cincinnati's a good example. Kansas City, like you mentioned, that's a really good example too. And trading Tyreek Hill has actually benefited Patrick Holmes because it's forced him to play at a more horizontal level than a vertical level, which I think was a big reason they would get into trouble last season. I think that's why they lost that lead to Cincinnati, and that was something that happened multiple times over the course of the season. So yeah, there are different ways to do it. But for the Patriots right now, it's about making sure that you continuously stockpile quality draft picks, and then you continue to hit on those draft picks like they certainly did in 21, and it absolutely appears they did it again in 22.
Yeah. Speaking of playing the long game, no franchise is doing this like the Chicago Bears, who are actively leaking talent. Their best defenders are on the trade block: Robert Quinn, Roquan Smith. It looks like both of them are going to play. We're not going to spend a ton of time on the Bears, but I'm going to stick to the same format. For the folks who have been listening, it's 3 matchups, 2 keys, and then a 1 extra point. But first, the Bears are 2-4, running down their vitals. They are 31st in the league by DVOA. So that's second worst team in the league, 30th in offense, 19th in defense, 8th on special teams. Their wins are against the 49ers in a monsoon. They edged out the Texans in the Week 3 Suck Bowl. And then their last 3 games, however, all losses, have been 1-score games. So they're in the mix. They're hanging around. It's just like Cleveland last week. They're not doing much more than just kind of hanging around and hope things go well, because offensively, nothing is going well. They're 31st in passing, again, second worst in the league, 20th in rushing. Defensively, you're looking at another bottom 10 run defense, 27th, but they were 14th against the pass. That despite having the worst pass rush in the league, according to Pro Football Focus. So I say all of that, and it explains why the Patriots are 8-point favorites, even though there's some lingering uncertainty about whether it'll be Bailey Zappe versus Mac Jones. Let's just get right into the matchups and look at this from the standpoint of these kind of battlegrounds could swing this game either into a Patriots blowout or a close Patriots win, or maybe a loss. And I look at Jacoby Myers in the slot. He's their number 1 receiver statistically. He's in the number 1 area where the Bears are just giving up yards like a slot machine that's broken. You don't have to put anything into it. Like they're giving up 11 yards per attempt in the slot. I think he should eat. If he doesn't and they don't feed him, they're going to let the Bears hang around closer than this should be. That's my first matchup.
Well, I'll just take it, pretty simple from there is the turnovers. I mean, if the Patriots start giving the ball away, that's a recipe to lose to anybody. And the Bears all those stats are incredible, but like that matches up with what you've been seeing from them on the field. I mean, they're almost like the opposite of the Giants, who are continuously finding ways to win these close games. The Bears are continuously finding ways to lose these close games. Now, the Bears are absolutely still in the early stages of a rebuild. Their number 1 priority this year is to get Justin Fields going in a positive direction. And he's showing some good flashes. But last year was a tough rookie year. Their system was bad, and they just didn't have a lot of help around him. They still don't have a lot of help around him. They're still kind of recalibrating the books. They're trying to figure it out. I mean, their best defensive player requested a trade back in August, and that hasn't happened. They didn't want it to happen, but it's they're very, very early in a rebuild that could take quite a while. So those numbers are not surprising. I just think, don't give the ball away. And if it's Zappe, you don't want one of those like crash back to earth type of performances that you saw in the first half from Cooper Rush against the Eagles. Or, if it's Mac Jones, if the offensive line is protecting you the way that they've protected Bailey Zappe for the last 2 weeks, there's no more of those early season turnovers. I think I give Mac Jones a pass for some of those turnovers because the line protection was so bad. If the line continues to play as well as they have for even going into Green Bay, they played fairly well at the end of the Green Bay game, especially when they were running the ball. If the line continues to play that well, you can't be turning the ball over.
Yeah. All right. It sounds like you've got one of our 2 keys. So there we go. A couple matchups left. I'm just going to highlight.
Realizing it.
Yeah, that's fine. This is tied to the turnovers, though, because I think a player that you also have to watch for on defense, who folks forget about, and I even threw out in a potential fake trade just because I think he would fit really well in New England, is Eddie Jackson. Safety there, ball hawk some years, one of the worst safeties by a lot of analytics. Other years, right now he's found somewhere in the middle, playing within a new defense for Matt Eberflus. I think, though, that Eberflus had something for the Patriots last year that slowed them offensively when he was a defensive coordinator for the Colts. Patriots coming off a bye, so was Indy, that they get those early turnovers. Shaq Leonard picks off Mac Jones, and Mac has one of his worst games as a pro, despite the rest and despite the extra prep. Jackson's a guy at that position with some sort of late rotations and some sort of minor disguise that could give the Patriots problem. The Bears also have more time coming into this game, so they're more rested. They didn't list anyone, 0 people on their injury report on Thursday. So they're healthy. It doesn't guarantee they're going to be more prepared because the Patriots won multiple games last year when their opponent was coming off a bye and they were not. However, I just think the Eberflus track record, if he can get what he wants out of Eddie Jackson, that could be a problem with the turnover. So I'm looking at Mac or Zappe versus Eddie Jackson. I mentioned Jacoby Myers. The last one for me is just whoever is across from Isaiah Wynn. And we don't have to belabor this point, you mentioned already. But giving up a sack and a penalty in 4 straight weeks, that streak has got to end. If that streak ends on Monday night, I think they're in fine position.
Yeah, Wynn's been the weak link up front, and you're seeing improvement across the board. With Wynn, it's like sometimes you can take getting beat physically every now and like that's going to happen. The guys across the ball, they live in big houses too, but you can't have like the communication breakdowns that lead to free pass rushers heading at your quarterback and then getting them injured. So, and the penalties are, it's just, every now and then you get called for holding. The procedural penalties are just more often than not a lack of focus. So they need more out of him. You mentioned Eberflus and what he did last year. That was a far more talented Colts defense than what the Bears have right now. Like they had some talented players, scattered about there. You mentioned Jackson because he's a veteran. So you're right. Like, can you strike a chord with him? Can you figure out a way to play him as a chess piece? Tell him to look for something that's going to, he can play off of the front 7, the front 6. Even a Roquan Smith, a guy who has got a ton of talent. Can you get him to do something? Can you get him to play off some of those pass rushers? Again, they're not like primetime pass rushers or whatever. They no longer have Khalil Mack or anybody from the 85 squad. But I think it's a lot to ask. But I certainly see, again, just don't be stupid with the ball and run the ball the way that you have, and you should have a comfortable victory.
So I'm going to hit on my second key then really quickly. Run left. Like they have stopped going as much weak side behind Trent Brown because of all the bad things that the Browns and the Lions did in their matchups. They actually stopped what had become Patricia's pet run, going weak side left behind Brown, where the idea is very simple. We're going to put a ton of guys to the right side, tight ends that you have to match players with players. That gives us more room. And we're just going to run behind the 380-pound guy who you can't really beat one-on-one. The problem was structurally teams found ways around that and then anticipated when Patricia was going to call it. They've averaged just 1 yard per carry going left behind Trent Brown. The Bears, however, are allowing 5.4 yards per carry to the offense's left. And I think whether you need to dress it up formationally or have different motions and shift the tight ends pre-snap left to right and then go behind Trent Brown, find a way to get that going. It's not unlike finding a way to get touches for a skill position player, right? Like we need to involve Trent Brown a little bit more if you're the Patriots, and that'll help get the running game going because they've been particularly weak to that side where Robert Quinn, who gets a ton of flowers from Bill Belichick this week, all for being a pass rusher. Not much against the run, and that's just been Robert Quinn's calling card. It's not bad. It's just the kind of player he is. All right, let's wrap up on one extra point. Anything game related we haven't covered, which is most things, but just kind of like has your attention when otherwise is kind of like matchup. We haven't done any of the Belichick George Halas stuff, so that could be something we touch.
No, I think the most important thing here is, go back to the quarterback quote unquote controversy.
Ooh.
Like the worst case scenario the Patriots can have is Mac has, a couple careless plays, reverts to a couple of the bad habits, even if whether there's a protection breakdown or not, and then, gets up and looks a little gimpy, maybe he, because the ankle still hurts or something like that. That's not something the Patriots need. That type of storyline kind of creeping back into the mix because, Zappe did play well and it's a home game. So you're going to have, it is a home game, right? I didn't screw that part up. Okay. Go on like a 10-minute diatribe and you're like, Jeff, hold on. We got to redo this whole thing. You got the home crowd with the Zappe fever. You got a bunch of people with ice packs on their heads and thermometers hanging out of their mouths, clamoring for the backup quarterback, who's always the most popular guy in town. Yes. So, you just want to see Mac Jones come in and play within the system the way that Zappe did the last couple of weeks. The Patriots clearly have all the confidence in the world that's going to happen. That's why they're going to go with Mac Jones as soon as he's ready, which, again, looks like Monday night is a very realistic possibility. And, once he gets things back on track, assuming he will, I think that's when everybody's going to kind of settle down and say, oh, right, that's why he's the guy. You don't want to completely forget what happened in 2021 when he was, for a good, strong chunk of the season, the best rookie quarterback going.
Yeah, or even week 3, which, yes, he throws 3 interceptions and they lose to the Ravens, and it was a bummer of a loss. But you look at the last 2 picks he threw, one was desperation heave, we're down 2 scores, less than 2 minutes left. Like, you don't care about that interception, not to mention he gets hit on that play and injured. The second one was Devontae Parker in the end zone where Parker just completely missed an audible. Like, that was on him. He didn't run a route. You can go back and watch the play. Mac throws it to the back corner of the end zone, which tells me it's one of these a corner route, and Parker is supposed to win a jump ball, which he's typically very good at. Just didn't happen. So that really comes down to one turnover for Mac, who otherwise had some of the best throws of the season and set a career high in passing yards. So I think you'd happily take that as a Patriots fan.
And not just that, but like just watching that game, there were times when it looked like, especially with the way the season started, there were times when it looked like the Ravens were just going to pull away from this thing and kind of end it early. And Mac Jones did help them come back. Like, he was a pretty good reason for that. I'll even, you mentioned like the context, which is certainly more valuable than anything I've added, but like the context behind those turnovers, week 1, that team looks at the interception on the first drive as hey, you know what? Like, they took a chance. The chance was there. It just didn't go their way. And the Dolphins made a really good play. Sometimes that stuff happens too. You don't always have to take it off the quarterback because it was a drop, like the Zappe pick. Some of those are just like, hey, you know what? You kind of live with it because they took a chance because it was there. It just didn't necessarily work out because the other guy made a better play, as opposed to just, you don't see a weak side linebacker crossing in front of your route and you throw it right to him. Like, those are the ones that I think hurt everybody a whole lot more.
Like Shaq Leonard last year against the Colts at Eberflus.
And it all comes full circle.
Yeah. And look, the bottom line with this is just, we can call this chapter of the Patriot season fun with small sample sizes. 3 for Mac that aren't great, 2 for Bailey Zappe that have been very good. Does not mean that they suddenly switch roles or caliber of player. It's just you don't learn a whole lot in small samples. That said, look, we're getting to the 7-game mark here of the season. Like, per Belichick's words or ours, this is when you start to know what you have. And I think a decided win here over the Bears would say a lot about a team, even though you go, it's the Bears, it's the Browns, it's the Lions. Like, the alternative is to not beat them out or not blow them out, beat them closely. And then you really don't know. I think this says they're going to hang around. They'll be in the mix. And that's what you want, especially given the way that the season started. One last stat for me. The Bears are last in blitz rate. They're blitzing 13.9% of the times. I think whether it's Zappe or Mac, that helps you pre-snap, a clear picture. You don't have to count on extra rushers, which is good. The Belichick Halas thing, real quick, how much does he cares about this a lot, right? Like, he's going on because he wants to coach. It's the only thing he's ever known. It's the only thing that lights his fire. He feels most alive on the sideline and game planning and preparing. but like he's going to pass Shula also because that's something he wants, right?
I was thinking about this the other day, coincidentally. I didn't realize you were going to bring this up, but if I'm looking at 2024, that would be, this is a big leap of faith here that my math is correct. That would be Belichick's 50th season in the NFL. That's also pretty much when he's on pace to pass Shula for the all-times win record. So everybody kind of wants to forecast like how long does Belichick want to do it? And honestly, it wouldn't, if assuming they continue to win and Robert Kraft is cool with this, I wouldn't be shocked if Belichick coaches till he's 80 because I just don't see him, being fulfilled doing anything else after. Like you see these guys retire like Tom Brady for like 40 days and he's like, wow, this sucks, I need to play football. These, not everybody handles retirement in a great way. Like Belichick, I think I've said this for years, like I don't see, when he retires, he has to know like this is it, I can't have any second guesses, I'm not coming back and coaching Jacksonville. It's he's going to be all in on this decision, but like I think it goes till a minimum, assuming they continue to win, a minimum of the 24 season, because it gets them to 50 seasons in the NFL, and that's more likely than not when he passes Shula.
The only thing I ask of Bill if this happens is if he does coach till 80, because we've seen physically how Brady has changed and his face is sunken in and somehow it's longer. And I don't know how that happened. I just can't have Belichick walking on the sideline like King Varys his last 3 episodes in the House of Dragon, where he's literally falling apart and there are holes in the man's face. I'm not saying it's going to get there. I'm just saying we can't have that level of change. I'm glad the king is dead as far as the House of Dragon goes. For those who were hoping to avoid a spoiler, look, it's been more than a week, maybe 2. It's just 80 is a long time, man. And that's something. But look, I got this question on a podcast the other day, and I said, I was asked the same question when I came on the beat 4.5 years ago. I have the same answer, 3 to 4. And here we are 3 to 4 years later. He's still coaching. Check back in 3 to 4 when he's still here. All right. Mailbag really quickly.
Hold on. No, I'm going to interrupt you really quickly. If Brady plays till he's 50, like I've been saying, he's going to do for like, I don't even know how many years. I want all the credit in the world for that. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, you got it. Marking it down right now. Think that I forgot to put down who asked these questions, but these are all from Twitter. So if you ask it, you know what it is. I think this one is from Ashley. When Mac comes back, will they keep the offense as, quote, simple, unquote, as they did with Zappe? I take simple to mean probably the same amount of play action, more screens, and probably more under center. What do you think about that?
I honestly, I believe Matt Patricia and Joe Judge are finding a groove, and it's coming to fruition the last 2 to let's say 3 weeks. And so I don't think they should change. I really believe that what they're doing is working better. And Bailey Zappe did a really good job of operating within that system. Get back to that. Like, you don't need to just all of a sudden change the offense because Mac Jones is in there. I think let him operate within the system, let him be responsible with the ball, and continue the groove you're finding. Because, as much as those guys had gotten hammered earlier in the year, back in, the uncertainty before the regular season started, those guys are doing a hell of a job right now. And I wouldn't want to stray from what's been working.
Yeah, and here's the thing with Zappe in particular, that is a direct reflection on Joe Judge, his quarterbacks coach, and Evan Rothstein, to whatever degree Evan Rothstein is involved coaching the quarterbacks, because, Mac was molded in part by Josh McDaniels. You can't say that for Bailey Zappe when he's succeeded. I think the Patriots should take a lot of the elements that Zappe thrived with, more play action, certainly more under center, a couple more screens, just because generally those are a good idea, or at least from the level they were doing with Mac when he was dropping back with play action 11% of the time, lowest in the league, and bump that up a little bit. I think the bigger point is, though, you don't want to keep it as simple because it was a more limited menu with Zappe. Like, he's a rookie, and you didn't want to overwhelm him. Smart as he is, Mac opens up the whole menu. And that's what you want as a game plan offense. And to me, watching that Cleveland game, it's 3-3 in the second quarter. What they tried didn't work initially, but they were able to pivot and kind of evolve as this game plan offense by leaning on Zappe, who thankfully for them came through. You can do that from the get-go with Mac and be the offense game planning week to week and have that work from the first drive. It's just, I don't think you should intentionally make it harder on Mac just because you can. It's, let's make it as easy for him as possible while maintaining our flexibility and our schematic diversity to keep the opponent off balance. All right.
And honestly, like that's just good coaching. Like how often have we heard over the years, whether it was with McDaniels and Belichick or any good coaching combination across the league. Mac, put your players in positions of strength. And for the Patriots, if that's simplifying something to make sure that the offense is functional, that's just good coaching. With Bailey Zappe, he goes into that Green Bay game having played virtually no reps in practice with the starting offense. And like them getting him ready for that first start a week later was really impressive. But like you said, like it's like going from calculus to first grade math. I mean, it's just two totally different areas of where you are within the system and the playbook. But again, I think like it's good coaching to make sure that you keep your guy playing at a responsible level.
Yeah. And credit too for Patricia and Judge, who you mentioned. And I've said my default line when everyone's bashing them over the summer, and I'm saying this offense looks terrible. I don't think this is a particularly good idea given their backgrounds and their skill sets, is just if they're going to be bad, let them dig their own graves. I'm not here to bury them before it's warranted. The last couple of weeks, I see Matt Patricia much improved as a play caller. And part of that is just the early pivoting from we're trying to bully Cleveland, even though they have the worst run defense in the league. It's not working. Okay, let's hit more play action. Let's throw more on first down. That's more what I'm talking about with Mac. And also, they just kind of ran out of plays at Green Bay. Like, that was a really nice job by Patricia in that second half. And I mentioned and wrote about this in my film review. When they get stuffed in overtime on 2nd and 5, it was the 9th time he had called that weak side run left. And to me, it was one too many times. But also, he's probably looking at the play sheet going, if I was checking boxes on every time I had called every single play, all of the boxes were checked. So at some point with a player like that, like, you have nothing else left to call because he's a rookie. But Mac, it sounds like we'll be back. Okay, now is Yadni Kajust close to coming back, and could that impact Isaiah Wynn? Is Wynn on the trade block?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what a team wants to give up for him. I mean, if somebody comes up with a 3rd round pick, I honestly, I think you have to strongly consider it.
I think you do it, right? Like, he's in the last year of his deal. I think that person is also coming up with a drink in hand, right? Like, it's a 3rd round pick over here and a gin and tonic over here. Like, that's just sorry, go ahead.
I'm telling you, like, I'll pull like a Peyton Manning on the Manning cast here and just talk about all the people I talk to. And you can be Eli and make fun of me. But every single time I talk to somebody at an executive level about a potential trade acquisition or who are they looking for, every single time somebody brings up, we need offensive linemen. Like, this is like every single team wants offensive linemen. I guarantee you the Patriots could get something for Wynn. I don't know what something is. I don't know if a 3rd's realistic. I don't know if it's a 5th. I have no idea. But if they want to move him, if they want to get some picks, if they're comfortable with the depth, they could absolutely do it if they want to.
Yeah, I'm not ruling it out. I think the contract, because it's fully guaranteed and around 11 with the 5th year option, is prohibitive. His play obviously has been terrible. I think then you're probably transitioning him back to left tackle because you're not signing up for a guy to give up assets for who's giving up a sack and a penalty per week. But we also know that's not the player that he is or has been over the majority of his career. Like, knock at him all you want. Last year dealing with COVID, injuries, playing through that. He's a more versatile piece. I also just wonder if he right now, because this is how they've been practicing, is their backup left tackle. Or if Trent Brown goes down, and if there's anything we know about Trent Brown besides he's humongous, it's that eventually big man goes down. So that insurance with Wynn, who can play left tackle, might be valuable, but they like Yadni Kajust. He's been more of a ghost for the rest of his career, but him playing swing tackle in camp and a little bit of the preseason let them deal Justin Herron. So what I know about that injury, I think it was a finger or a hand. Like, that's not season ending. I think he will be back at some point. I just don't know if it's enough confidence for them to say, yeah, we'll roll the rest of the season with Kajust at right tackle, because Marcus Cannon's also here. And too bad none of those other 31 GMs that you talk to, because it's clearly everyone, listening to you, but, didn't have a Marcus Cannon on the street. And I think the Patriots got very lucky in that sense because he's been really good.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been really useful and helpful the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. All right. Last one. And this is similar. We've already touched on this. Does a good performance from Tyquan Thornton make Aguilar expendable at the trade deadline? Again, if you find that GM after 4 or 5 drinks who's gotten a surplus of draft picks, go right ahead. I just think Aguilar, who didn't practice on Thursday and has a hamstring injury, which for speed guys is extra problematic because hamstring is finicky. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I won't get into Aguilar as much because we've already hit on that. But seeing the way they used Thornton was really intriguing. Like, do they have a bigger plan for him? Like, I don't. He doesn't have to be Deebo Samuel in terms of like catching and running with the ball and all that other stuff. But that speed is useful. They clearly intend to use it, and he's in a very short time become one of their more intriguing offensive players.
Yeah. All right, Jeff. I think we did it. You made it. You can go back to bed or get caffeinated or otherwise get ready for Monday Night Football, Patriots Bears, which I don't know if we need a drinking game for coffee or whatever, but the amount of times that they bring up George Halas in the second half when this game is probably 20-6, that might be the go-to sip for every Halas sip.
Should we set an over-under?
Ooh. I'll say, and look, it's a monumentous occasion. The fact that Belichick could do this against the Bears is kind of cool. I'd set 8.5. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll go with 14.5.
Wow. Okay. All right. I feel that was one question too many. We'll let you go, but thanks as much as always for coming on, buddy.
Anytime.